Hello and welcome to this second episode of 4Plant podcasts on IDMP, or Identification of Medicinal Products. My name is Anne Pousset and I'm a senior consultant at Epista Life Science, where I'm supporting my clients when facing new challenges, primarily in the area of regulatory affairs. Marketing authorization holders with products in the European Union will be the first to use IDMP to communicate information about their products to the European Medicines Agency, EMA. This is happening over the next few years, where the EMA will roll out their first iteration of IDMP embedded in their Master Data Initiative named SPOR or SPOR. In this second podcast, we've asked our valued collaboration partner MAIN5 how marketing authorization holders best prepare themselves for the changes that are coming and how to secure continuous compliance going forward. So let me introduce you to my interview partner for today, Katharina Meyer from MAIN5.
Thank you for the introduction, Anne, and also a warm welcome to the audience from my side. Before I start with the details on IDMP, I would like to take the chance to briefly introduce MAIN5 and myself. MAIN5 is a Germany-based consulting firm specialized in designing and implementing initiatives of strategic relevance in the life science industry. Currently, we do support many of our clients to set up business processes and implement respective digital solutions to be able to submit IDMP on time. We are facing similar questions and challenges at our clients when it comes to efficient and gainful preparation for IDMP readiness. My name is Katharina Meyer, and before I joined MAIN5, I worked for almost 15 years in regulatory affairs in the pharmaceutical industry. At MAIN5, I work as a senior consultant where my main focus is to advise our clients in the implementation of efficient business processes and regulatory ID solutions. In the first years of my professional career in the pharma industry, I was very closely involved in the ECDD rollout. And I remember that the standardization of submissions had a major impact on the regulatory environment. The regulatory business changed and it got more standardized. For example, ID solutions were introduced to compile, publish and validate ECDD submissions. And I would say that the journey for ECDD is not over yet. Even after so many years, health authorities all over the world are still busy to implement ECDD or to further improve the ECDD submission process, for example, by introducing submission gateways. There is a constant change in the regulated environment for the pharma industry. And as just highlighted, even after so many years, the ECDD journey is not finished yet. And now you have to prepare for the next major change called IDMP.
So based on your experience with the ECDD rollout, would you say that IDMP has or will have the same level of impact to the life science industry at the way we're working?
Yeah, I believe that with the go live of IDMP, we would experience a similar or even bigger change because we exchange product information purely on the basis of structured data that has to be maintained across the entire product lifecycle. And I would say that in comparison to ECDD, where regulatory affairs was the only function affected by the change, IDMP requires an even more holistic view within your organization.
So what I hear you saying between the lines is that IDMP will not only impact the way we work in regulatory affairs, but rather in the whole organization. IDMP is, in other words, a new type of challenge. How can the marketing authorization holders prepare for this?
Yeah, the 5 main steps towards IDMP implementation are: first, to understand the requirements, of course. Then you should evaluate the current status of IDMP readiness in your organization. Come up with a plan on how to address the gap. Define the key resources that are required. And last but not least, it is very important to bring awareness about IDMP to the organization by introducing proper change management.
Okay. Well, let's look at these steps in more detail. And at the same time, Katarina, could you please share the main challenges that your clients are facing when it comes to IDMP?
Sure, and I would say at the beginning, it's all about getting familiarized with the requirements. And one of the biggest hurdles for marketing authorization holders is to understand what and how to prepare for IDMP. And the time is running as the go live for IDMP for central approved products is already planned for February next year. And latest by 2023, you should be ready to maintain IDMP for all of your marketing authorizations, as IDMP is becoming mandatory for all procedure types in the EU. And even if it sounds like there is still a lot of time to get there, you should definitely start to get your organization IDMP ready now. What I can highly recommend to start with is to get familiarized with the guidance documents, such as the 6 ISO standards that describe the IDMP standards and technical specifications, the SPOR master data model that defines the data elements for the 4 areas: substance, product, organization, and referentials. And read the EMA implementation guide that was released this year in February, and it's chapters 1 to 9 as outlined in the picture, because it gives you a good overview on the journey of IDMP implementation.
I'm sure you're familiar with the content of these documents. Based on your experience, would you say how easy is it to understand the content and then know what next steps to take?
Yeah. So we at MAIN5 experience in our daily business that especially smaller or medium enterprises do not have the experience in-house to translate the requirements and to map them to the processes of their organization. And I must admit that those guidance documents are very specific and complex, and it may be a big hurdle for smaller or medium enterprises to understand and interpret the requirements appropriately. And if this sounds familiar to some of you in the audience as well, please feel free to contact MAIN5. We offer individual support for your needs, for example, an online IDMP readiness workshop, where we elaborate the requirements and translate them into a rollout plan specific for your organization. And in addition to what I've just offered, Anne, I would also like to refer the audience to the first podcast episode, where you already provided a great overview on IDMP.
Thank you, Katarina. Once the marketing authorization holder understands the requirements, there seems to be several tracks of activities to initiate. So where's the best place to start?
Firstly, you need to answer yourself the question, where do I currently stand in terms of IDMP compliance? Evaluate the current status with performing an analysis of your data. From our experience, it is very helpful to generate, for example, a simple Excel spreadsheet listing all data elements required for IDMP. Then you can start to check if and where the data is available. And during this exercise, you should strive to answer the following questions. What are the sources of my data? Is my data stored in systems, in documents like the SMBC, or is it maybe not even available at all? As a next step, try to answer the question, what is the quality of my data? Check how consistent your data is. I would recommend to introduce a common definition for each data element, as we experience quite often that the data definitions are not consistently used, for example, across different types of products. Then the next question would be if your data requires a cleanup or a mapping to be compliant with the SPOR data model. And also check if there are any conflicts in your data. Do different functions in your organization use different terms or definitions, for example? And for almost all of our clients, it has been the case that the data was available in multiple systems. And I'm sure that you can relate because it's just common in the life science industry to have individual systems in place for different business areas, right? So firstly, you should define the source of truth for each data element. And as a second step, you can map the data element to the IDMP data model and come up with a clear definition to be used for this specific element by all relevant functions.
Okay, so we learned that we should get an overview of the data that is required for IDMP and establish a source of truth. I assume that in any organization, the data and related processes, they're not yet fully compliant with IDMP. As the data and the related business processes must be adapted to fit IDMP requirements, what would you recommend to address that gap?
You should develop a solution roadmap. Define a goal, when and how you aim to be able to submit IDMP. It is also recommended to identify a business case for rollout. For example, pick a certain marketing authorization application that you would like to start with. And then come up with a plan on how to adapt your business processes to support the data flow. We offer our clients the approach to implement smart IDMP, an automated data flow. And in order to achieve that automation, you need to understand how the data is gathered in your organization. Which data element is required at which point in time. And furthermore, you need to define clear responsibilities and triggers in your process to enable that automated data flow. And having said this, I would say that IDMP requires a business process-oriented view in your organization. Try to understand the end-to-end process and consider all affected stakeholders in your data flow model. Start at the top of the triangle with integration of the IDMP process in your overall process map, and then break it down to the bottom of the triangle that defines the individual process activities. By having that top-down view on your processes, from aggregated to detailed, you may realize that there might be silos in your organization that were not relevant until now, but for IDMP, that silo might have to share a specific data element to support one harmonized data flow. So, in simple words, try to understand who delivers which data and how this function should provide the data at the right time.
So gathering data for IDMP should be associated with the existing business processes and support getting better understanding of the data flow in the organization. So while laying out these business processes, are there other areas that should be taken into consideration?
For sure. So I would recommend to also check and see if there are any other ongoing initiatives in your organization that are related or somehow have an overlap in what you're aiming to achieve. This could be a general master data initiative where regulatory data is part of the scope. It could be an update to the regulatory IT system that you will be using for IDMP submission, or a change to a system that will deliver parts of the data for IDMP. And by identifying those and starting up conversations and alignment will benefit not only on the data collection, but also on the general awareness of IDMP. Many companies use this exercise of getting IDMP ready to improve the IT system landscape or even to implement a respective regulatory information management system, short RIMS. And here I would like to emphasize that it is not absolutely necessary for pharmaceutical enterprises to introduce a RIMS to be able to submit IDMP. Of course, RIMS would support the organization not only in preparing the data package, but also for generating the FIRE message for IDMP submission. But nevertheless, for smaller, medium enterprises, it might be sufficient to continue to use the EBWeb radar for submitting the IDMP data as done currently for the XCVMBD submissions.
Such an exercise requires a lot of resources. What would you say are the key resources that are needed?
I would like to emphasize that even though regulatory affairs is the key function in data management and IDMP submissions, it requires resources beyond RA to succeed with IDMP. And looking at how the data flows in your organization, you would immediately realize that the data is scattered throughout all kinds of functions. and that finding the source of truth requires input from other areas. Therefore, it is essential to onboard the whole organization to the IDMP project. Furthermore, these departments are crucial for implementing sustainable data governance in your organization.
I may have a good example of what you just mentioned. The marketing status of a product is part of the IDMP requirement. This information is country or region specific and is likely first known by the company's local affiliate organization. It may be almost impossible to define a standardized way of transferring this information to regulatory affairs. It happens that the marketing status is maintained as a field in the regulatory information management system, but often it's filled by random if the regulatory product responsible person by chance got this information. The marketing status was never considered as regulatory information, and the status rather resides within the marketing department. It may be difficult to involve the marketing area in the IDMP discussions for the sake of one data field. They are likely not feeling responsible to maintain information in a regulatory information management system, but this should, however, be tracked and submitted as part of the IDMP package.
Yeah, that's a really good example, and that sounds like a common problem for larger organizations. And that's why I must emphasize once more that the whole organization is affected by IDMP.
We talked about the requirement, identifying and getting data ready. From what I hear, IDMP is a much broader topic than just submitting some product information to the agency. What are your recommendations on the more organizational side of things?
I would recommend to pursue proper change management. Bring awareness of IDMP to your organization. The goal should be to get a common understanding of the IDMP data model across all functions. Successful IDMP data governance requires a holistic view within an organization. As a quick wrap-up, I can summarize in a few words what I would recommend to start with. First, read the guidance documents and start with a gap analysis. I would recommend to pick a product, use an Excel sheet and map the data for a certain product to the SPOR data model. Although it requires a lot of effort, it would give you a hands-on experience on the data quality within your organization. And if all what we've just said is done properly, you would realize that, and that reminds me again on the ECDD journey, where we have experienced a similar standardization. That reminds me that the whole IDMP topic can bring a lot of benefits for your organization as well. You would have a clear, transparent data flow. You would have established efficient business processes, and you would have adequate regulatory ID systems in place.
Katarina, thanks for providing your insights to the IDMP implementation project activities.
It was a pleasure, and thanks to you, Anne, and Epista Life Science for the opportunity to share MAIN5's experience from our customer projects. And if any of you in the audience have any question to this episode, or if MAIN5 can support you in one of your current projects, please feel free to contact me via phone or email. Stay safe and goodbye. Thank you.